Hello and welcome to this 2022 Autism Faith Initiative webinar hosted by the Autism Faith Network. This webinar is entitled How to Have a Successful IEP Meeting. My name is Yolanda Pretlow. I am the Autism Faith Network Secretary and the facilitator for today's webinar. On with me today is our treasurer, Mrs. Dorothy Mack.
Hello.
Our founder and president, Mrs. Tanya Nash, will not be joining us today, but we would like to take a moment to thank her for her vision and the opportunity to help service families of children with autism. Our guest panelists today are Mrs. Danzella Watts and Ms. Ava Thompson.
Hello.
Mrs. Danzella Watts is the founder of Simply Put In It, LLC. In her 23-year career in the field of special education, she has been employed as a special education building administrator, technical college instructor, elementary, middle, and high school special education teacher, educational trainer, and a behavior specialist. In addition to that, she is the author of the short coffee table read, A Blended Cup of Joe. Her career as an educator has broadened her perspective on the importance of forging positive parent-school staff relationships. Therefore, at this stage in her professional life, it is her sincere desire to gift parents of students with disabilities with a clear understanding of the IEP process. Thus, the formation of Simply Put In It, LLC, with a mission to empower parents of students with special needs by simplifying the IEP process. Ms. Thompson is a partner of the Simply Put In It LLC and an expert in special education. Her 18 years of experience as a public school special educator and lead teacher for school districts in Georgia and Virginia provides you with an insider advantage to advocate on your students' behalf in IEP meetings of all IDEA disabilities. Ms. Thompson has attended hundreds of IEP meetings throughout her career on behalf of school districts, as well as a parent of her own children with IEPs. In her many years as a public school educator, she has led and implemented hundreds of IEPs, as well as represented school districts to assure FAPE is provided to students. Ms. Thompson has also participated in manifestation determination review meetings for school districts. Her expertise in all areas of IDEA disabilities will ensure your student receives all the appropriate services necessary for their academic and behavioral success. Her passion is to empower families and students with fair and equitable access to special education, regardless of demographics. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today and bringing all of your wealth of knowledge. We're going to jump right into the questions so that we have plenty of time, okay?
Sounds good.
What is an IEP and who can get one?
Okay, well, an IEP stands for an individual education program, and it's for students with disabilities. And as far as how they can get one, a student has to have a disability that impacts them academically. And there's two pathways in order to get to an IEP. The first pathway is through a direct parent referral, which is also called DPR. And the second pathway is through the response to intervention pathway, which is often called the RTI process.
Okay, so a parent can request an IEP for their student if they think their student is struggling, but the school administration can also refer a student for an IEP meeting, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
So with a DPR, parent direct referral, the parent refers the child, like they put in writing, that they like to recommend their child for special education services. And then within 10 calendar days, the school sets up a meeting with the parent to listen to the concerns and the reasons that they feel that their child needs special education services. They sign off on consent for testing by the county. And then within a 60-day calendar, like 60 school days, they reconvene to discuss the testing results and to determine if there's an academic impact. So they have an eligibility meeting.
Yes.
And if the student is found eligible, then they go either right into an IEP meeting to create that meeting, that IEP document, or they might schedule it for another day to come back and create the IEP document, just depending on timing.
Okay.
Yes.
So a parent's request is not an automatic IEP. There has to be testing for eligibility, correct? Okay.
Correct. And
How
then
does, oh,
I'm sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
Would you like for me to explain a little bit about the RTI process?
Sure.
Okay. So with the response to intervention, it's set up like a triangle. And the bottom tier is tier 1. All students start on tier 1. Now, if a student starts to struggle academically or with behavior, they're moved to tier 2, where a goal is established, strategies are put in place, and it's monitored by a school staff, typically a general education teacher. And then if they're not showing success with those particular strategies, they're moved to tier 3, which it's more intensive strategies that are put in place. And, they're meeting with the RTI committee for input and suggestions. And if a student still is not making progress, then they're recommended to be tested for special education. And so again, with that testing, it's an initial. And so it's, again, the 60 days in order to come back to meet after they've received data to support that the student is not progressing. And then, again, based on the testing and the academic impact, they would either not qualify, yes, and they would just be moved back down to tier 2 or tier 3, or they would be moved to tier 4, which is the special education tier, and receive an IEP and services. Danzella,
Awesome.
Did you have anything to add?
Yes, yes, partner. I would like to add, one statement as somewhat of a caution to parents when they proceed with that direct parent referral. Many times they're frustrated and anticipating, now my baby will get help. Now I finally will get the relief. But they have to remember, school districts are held to the state requirements. So if the psychologist who's testing your baby starts to ask for information like, we really need a medical report, we really need 6 weeks of data, because they're trying to hint to that parent without predetermining, because we don't predetermine, but as we're reading those reports and testing students, it leads us to a direction of where we can look based on the requirements. It is important for parents to listen and follow through with those school psychologists in order for that process for their children to be beneficial. And that way you're not at the table, you do not qualify because you're missing pieces, or we started too early, we didn't get enough data collection. And when that happens, it's very discouraging for the parent. And I want to encourage them, if that has happened, work with the school, go back to the table, allow that school to collect the data, go to the doctor, get your medical report. If there is a financial hindrance, the school district can request that medical report for you free of charge. So there are ways for parents to really work with the district to help them with that support for their children. Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How does an IEP differ from a 504?
Oh, great question. So with an IEP, it's for students with a disability that impacts their academics, whether, it's a learning disability or behavioral or autism or other health impairment. It just runs the gamut. And it's for a student who needs specialized instruction as well as accommodations. And that IEP, it's monitored by a special education teacher who would also be the case manager for that particular student. And it's implemented by the special education teachers. Whereas a 504 is for students that have a medical diagnosis that impacts their academics. And they only need accommodations, not specialized instruction. They don't need a second teacher or person in the room in order to present information differently. And that 504, it's monitored by a designated staff member in the school. Sometimes it's the counselor, or might be assigned to a general ed teacher, but it's not any type of special education personnel. And it's implemented by the classroom teachers, and the progress is kept by them as well.
Okay.
Danzella, did I forget anything?
Yeah, that's great. Great information.
Who should be present at the IEP meeting?
Okay. Now, by law, let's see. By law, it's a general education representative, preferably from the same grade level. It does not have to be the student's teacher. So sometimes parents get a little confused by that. Preferably it is. Also to the next member, a parent, we have to have the parents there, at least one parent to represent the student. And then we also have to have the LEA, which stands for Local Education Agent, who represents the county to ensure that FAPE, or a free appropriate public education, is provided. And this can be another special education teacher. It can be an administrator. The caveat is that they must be special ed certified. And the other member that's required is a special education teacher, who is generally the case manager. If the student receives speech or any kind of related services like OT, PT, any of that kind of stuff, then that service provider has to be there as well, unless parent gives prior approval to have them excused. And then the evaluator position person should be there as well. And this can be the special education teacher. So the special education teacher can wear two hats. They can serve as a special education teacher as well as the evaluator.
Okay. Can a parent opt out of being at the IEP meeting?
They can. Lots of school systems do not want that to happen. So they could do whatever means as they can to assure that the parent is participating in the meeting, whether it's by phone, virtually, in person. The goal is to have the parent be on board and part of the IEP committee to support their child in coming up with the decisions on the IEP.
If a parent thinks that they may get to the meeting and possibly not understand all of the information being given to them, can they bring someone with them?
They can, but they need to give prior notice to the case manager. So, preferably when the meeting's being established, that's the time to let the case manager know, say, hey, I'm going to be having so-and-so come to the meeting with me. And you have to describe like what their role will be in the meeting. So whether they're an advocate or just a family member for support, or whether they're legal, because depending on what their role is will determine if the county has to have somebody there to represent, the legal aspect of things. So it just really depends on the role of that person. Would you agree, Danzella, or have anything to add to that?
Yes, I do agree with that. And if the parent comes and they have not notified the school district has a right to table that meeting. So it's good for parents to know that the law protects the parent and the school and the child so that it can become a system working together for the good of that student. Mhm.
Okay. IEPs are supposed to be individualized for each student, but what are some of the common accommodations and goals for those with autism?
Okay, so we read this question. I'm thankful that our host would provided the questions to us ahead of time so that we could take a look at the questions. And this is a really phenomenal question because when we're thinking about our IEP is supposed to be individualized, I want parents to hear that in the name of that IEP document, Individual Education Program. So absolutely, your document should be individualized based on your child's needs. So when we speak of autism, and this is something that I want parents to hear and really let it sink into their hearts if you have a child with special needs, and that is every child with autism does not look like the other child with autism. So I may have a child with autism, and I may talk to my friend who also has a child with autism, and the friend may be receiving a certain type of service based on her child's need. I want parents to really understand that just because her child is struggling with that does not mean it pertains to your child, and to really think about those processes and really look at what your child's weaknesses are. So I do want to tell parents about some general accommodations that work for babies who have autism. And there are accommodations to support that overstimulation and the sensory needs and the fixations. So sometimes children with autism, you will see that they fixate on an object, they fixate on a word, they fixate with body movement. And if you retrieve that thing, if you stop them, you get a meltdown. And that is because they have imagined that it's finite. So when you're working with babies with autism, generally you're working with children who see everything black and white, very literal. Mm-hmm. So if I say to you, stop rocking, I think I can't ever rock again in my life. Well, then I'm going to have a meltdown. But if I say to you, and this is the strategy I'm providing right now, first, let's eat our breakfast, and then we can rock for 5 minutes. Then let's do blah, blah, blah. Then we can. As long as the baby understands, they will receive that sensory need. They will receive the item that they're craving, then you can get them to do work. And that is how it's done in the school setting. We give them those first things, we provide that workload, and then we provide a preferred tangible, a preferred sensory, a preferred movement break. So there are other things that work as well, explicit one-step directions, especially when they're small, okay? All right. Okay. Ava, Ava, do you want to
add? Yes, because generally, and not always, students with autism are very routine based. Mm-hmm. You know, they like to follow a routine. It makes them feel safe. If their routine or schedule is going to change, a typical accommodation would be to give them a heads up that their schedule is going to change. You know, tomorrow we're going to have a fire drill, or remind them what that looks like. Or tomorrow it's early release, or tomorrow it's a testing schedule. So you're not going to go to the first, second, and third periods like you normally do. We're not going to follow the same schedule. You might have lunch earlier, you might have recess later, or, you know, that type of thing. Yes. And talk them through that so they're not getting surprised and not able to transition and go with the flow.
Okay. How does a parent know if the goals developed are appropriate for their child?
So parents, this is so very easy. When you go into your IEP meeting, you're looking at your weaknesses section. So there's a section that either says functional needs or student weaknesses. Everything identified in that weaknesses section should be translated into a goal or a student support. So if they say to you in that meeting, well, we're going to work with toileting through student supports, we're going to create a toileting schedule, then that's through supports. But then they can also say, we're going to create a goal so that we can monitor that. So we would have supports and a goal to follow. And all of that, parent, starts with those needs. So when you're in those meetings and you get to the end of your IEP and you're listening to those supports, make sure you're asking, wait, now does this support his need for organization? Wait, does this support his processing deficit? Does this support his need to have a test read? And then it should translate all the way to those goals and services.
Okay.
Ms. Thompson, Ava, would you like to add to that?
No, that was perfect.
Yes. Thank you.
How are parents, I'm sorry, how are parents able to monitor their child's progress with the IEP goals?
Yes, so parents, your case manager, so every child is assigned an IEP case manager in the school district. Some districts just call them your child's special ed teacher, but the special ed teacher that your child is assigned to be responsible for that IEP process should send you a progress report about the special ed goals. And the school district will give you that timeline for when you should receive them. Mm-hmm. If in the first 9 weeks of school or by second semester, you've received nothing about the progress of your students' IEP goals, then you definitely should reach out to the case manager. If the case manager is not able to help you, then you go to that building lead for the special ed department. And if the building lead can't help you, sometimes you have to escalate to district levels in order to make sure that your child's needs are being met in that building setting. Okay.
Right, like Danzella said, with every grading period, with a report card, a student will receive a progress report. Now, it can either be a hard copy that's sent home, or it could be electronic, and it'll be emailed. And if you have any questions about that progress report, then you would just contact the special education teacher or case manager in writing to let them know what questions or concerns you may have.
And you can also call them. So we like to make it very easy for parents. And if they, I want to reiterate what I said about reaching out, because parents can be afraid of this process. And you know what, if I were not a special ed representative or teacher, I would be afraid of it and I wouldn't know what to do. If that case manager cannot help you, go to the next person, which is that building administrator for special ed. Mm-hmm. If that person cannot help you, escalate to the district level. It's very important to nip things in the bud right on the onset so that you're not struggling for the entire year with the same thing because people are not communicating effectively with you. Now, we're public school servants, so I respect the public school in the process, but I love to partner with parents. It makes us stronger. We are stronger together when we work for our children. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Also, too, if a parent has any questions about their student's IEP, whether it's the progress or concerns about how it's being implemented or anything surrounded or pertaining to it, all they have to do is just contact the case manager. I personally recommend putting it in an email. That way it serves as documentation as well. And then a parent can request an IEP meeting at any time. By law, that's a part of the parental rights that a parent do that. Now, if a parent has a concern about an issue that's not pertaining to the IEP, then they can just request a parent-teacher conference and contact that teacher in the area of concern. But if it's specifically about the IEP, they can request an IEP amendment to discuss questions, concerns, etc.
Okay. All right.
How do you deal with school districts that cite funding and staffing as to the reason why your child can't receive a needed accommodation?
So I love this question. I love it so much. And again, I'm a public servant, okay? So I want to say first that I believe, and one of my colleagues loves to tell me, Danzella, you are a glass half full kind of girl. Well, I am. So I love to believe that every teacher wants the best for every child. And I believe, I love to believe, I mean, say I love it, that all districts and schools want to do the right things for children. So when I answer this question, I'm going to answer it with caution to say that this is respect for parents, because simply putting it means putting it together for parents to understand these processes. And so when I'm here speaking today, as a public servant, I'm speaking to the parents right now. I want parents to know that that is a direct legal violation to their child's IEP rights. So when a school tells you, you cannot have this service that they know that they put as a weakness in your child's IEP, you're looking at it, you're reading it, and you're saying, but you said that he da 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 da. Be concerned, parents. That is a violation of your rights and your child's rights. So sometimes the district, so that's my caution. And I'm going to say again, I believe if you can't get what you need from the district, from that school, you must not wait to support your babies. Escalate to the district if you need it so that they can come in and sort that out for you. So we think of the district as this big bad bully. No, they're there to support schools. So when you call them, they want to come help that school help you. So remember that, parents, when you're having to escalate. But to add to this, there is a caveat. And right now with COVID as a culprit for all the disruptions in the educational process right now, sometimes schools don't have the staff, but they're in the process to hire. Then that is not a penalty. That is not a violation. They just don't have the staff yet because no one has accepted the job. Normally what you're going to hear in those meetings is, this is where we are. And this is when you know you're in a phenomenal school and you want to kiss everybody there. This is where we are. We don't have this person, but this is how your baby is going to be served to make sure they're getting that service provided. Then you know you're working with a team who's looking out for your child. But if you hear, we're not hiring, we don't care, and I'm being candid because I know what parents have heard. And these are hurtful words that come from places that you think are shields of safety. But if you hear, no, we don't have it and we're not going to replace that, now you need to start moving forward to the escalation process to that district level.
Yes. Or if you hear, we don't do that here.
Yes.
Like we don't do small group here, or that type of thing. It's what the child needs. It is required, and that's documented on the IEP. They have to follow through.
So Ms. Watts, I heard you use the word several times, rights. Rights.
Yes.
How does a parent go about advocating for their child when they believe that their child's rights are being violated? This is not one of the questions that I gave you.
But this is a great question. And it's a great question because it goes with what we were just speaking of. Parents, be knowledgeable about your rights. I want to tell you that the state of Georgia has recordings of your rights in English. So if you're busy, play them so that you can hear. School districts are mandated, parents, to explore your rights with you in those IEP meetings. So if you know you already have a concern that something is amiss and you can't touch it, but you know something is amiss, you ask them, please explain my rights in detail, not the abridged version, I want the full copy of my rights with an explanation so that I understand what I can ask for in this meeting on behalf of my child. Ask for those school districts to read those rights to you. Seek yourself to the Georgia Department of Education. Now, Ava and I will tell you, we are not lawyers. We feel like lawyers because we know so much about special ed, but we are not. And part of what we do is help parents understand their rights. If you have to go to due process, that is a very easy process. It's 2 or 3 lines in your parental rights. Pick up that copy, look at it. If you don't understand it, the school is mandated by law to explain them to you. And if the case manager can't, it is her job to reach out and get some support to help you with that.
Also, too, just to piggyback off of what Danzella is saying, when an IEP meeting is scheduled, the case manager is supposed to send out the parental rights prior to the meeting. It'll either be sent with the meeting invitation or with a draft of the IEP. So that way, you have time as a parent to review those rights. And then when you meet for the IEP, at the beginning of the meeting, towards the beginning, the case manager should ask, did you receive your parental rights? You say yes. Do you have any questions about those parental rights? And that is the time to ask those questions, because in the minutes it's documented that they were received and whether you had questions or no, you did not have questions. And then, what those questions and responses would be. I'm going to tell you, from all the IEPs I've had, I can count on one hand where a parent has asked a question about their parental rights. Generally, the parents are, nope, I don't have any questions. I'm good. And they go on, and whether they read them or not, I couldn't say, but
if you are a parent that's concerned, you stop and say yes. And if you at the meeting say no, it is your right to call the school and say, I need someone to review my rights with me. So it doesn't have to be done in an IEP. It's mandated by law for the IEPs, like Ava said. But as a parent, you have a right to call and ask questions. And if you call me and say, I need someone to go over my rights with me, I'm mandated by law to go over those rights with you. So if you miss it in an IEP meeting, don't beat yourself up. You are the parent. I am the person who knows what I should be doing for you. If I didn't, and I knew that you were confused about something, we can also say, let's give that onus to the person in your meeting who knew your rights and did not support you with that. So parents, don't be afraid to ask. And I want to round that up with that part. Don't be afraid to ask.
Yes. And I just thought about something else. The parental rights, they're printed in different languages.
Yes, they are.
So if a parent's more comfortable reading in a different language, they can request the parental rights in that language. Also, too, just to go back just one step, when you were asking about required members of an IEP. Now, a translator is not a required member, but if a parent does not understand English that well, or they understand a different language, they need to let the case manager know, I would like to have a translator at my student's IEP meeting in whatever language. And so that way the case manager can make arrangements with the county to have the translator present at that IEP meeting or eligibility meeting, whatever meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And speaking on not being afraid, I can say that in one of my daughter's IEP meetings, I did stop the meeting. I asked for a break and I went and got my rights, and I came back because I was asking for something that they were telling me I couldn't have. And I went and got the rights. I brought them back and I asked for it again. They told me no again. And I pointed out where it was in my parental rights that they had
Absolutely.
to provide me with the documentation that I was asking for. So yes, absolutely, parents, do not be afraid to advocate for your child.
Yes.
What should a parent do if they have the accommodations in writing, but they feel like the IEP is not being followed?
Great question. So if a parent doesn't feel that the IEP is being followed with fidelity, like their accommodations aren't being provided or the supports aren't there, contact the case manager and request an IEP meeting, because let them know that you have concerns. And then at that meeting, you want to discuss any concerns that you might have and talk through that conversation about, well, how is this being implemented? Where's the documentation for that? Whatever it is.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, a parent can request an IEP meeting at any time. They don't have to wait.
Well, they can request the meeting anytime, but it has to be a time where the team can get together. So it has to be a mutually agreed upon time. So IEP meetings can be held in the morning. They can be held during planning for the teachers, or they can be held after school. They can be held in person, they can be held virtually, or they can be held over the telephone. So generally what will happen is the case manager will say, okay, well, let me get with the team to see their availability, and then I'll get back with you with some dates and times, and we'll go from there as far as figuring out the best appropriate time to meet. But as far as, if let's say your student just got this IEP and you're 30 days into it, yes, they could request an IEP.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And can I piggyback on that? I just want to add one more caveat for parents. When you're talking about accommodations, I want you comfortable with that language of saying, what does that mean? Johnny is doing this. What type of support works for that behavior? Be very specific, parents, and then go on, be courageous. I encourage that. Like parents that are courageous and could engage me in conversation, I love it. So I want to say also then say, how will that look? Sometimes they can't tell you, and they may say, oh, give me a minute, we have to work out a plan, but you look for that how. Ask specifically, wait for your hows. If they don't get it to you, get back on that phone, because you're going to have another problem. Okay.
Also, too, it's important for parents to know there's a difference between an accommodation and a modification. But it's stipulated. It's explained on the IEP, but just for a little bit of background information. So let's say that a student is struggling with reading. They are below grade level. So an accommodation would be having things read to them, whether it's a person or it's technology reading to them. Whereas a modification would be that they're given the same information, but at like a first grade reading level or something like that, and they're in fifth grade. So a lot of times school districts steer away from modifications and do accommodations. So you just want clarity on that. Is this an accommodation or is this a modification? And it's okay to not have a modification, because you want your student to get grade level materials, but to be able to access that grade level material through accommodations.
Okay. What should parents do if they disagree, excuse me, with the recommendations of the school staff for their child's IEP?
So, excuse me. So if a parent disagrees with the committee decision, the first step, like Danzella said, is to work with the committee, because you guys are a team, and it's best to stay, have a good open working relationship, and just explain, in a calm manner, why you disagree with them, and just see if they can understand what you're saying. But you want to make sure that your concern, your disagreement is one, relevant to the student, and it's not a parenting issue or a home issue. And you want to make sure that that concern is noted, it's documented in the IEP minutes, that the parent does not agree with the committee decision on A, B, C, and D. If it's an initial eligibility, then a parent can decline services, because just because your student qualifies for special ed doesn't mean they have to receive those services. Parent has to give consent in order to receive them. Also, too, at any time during receiving special education services, a parent can decline, like withdraw their child from special education in writing. They don't have to continue down that special education road. Also, too, if a parent requests additional testing, let's say that a student is, their eligibility is good for another 2 years, but a parent's like, well, I want them tested because they haven't been tested since first grade and they're in fifth grade, and I want updated testing. They can request that as well, but just know that whenever you do any kind of testing, there's always that chance that a student might not qualify for services. So but that would be explained to the parent. And if talking with the committee, things aren't resolved, and if talking with the special education lead at that building and the parent concerns still are not resolved, then that's when the parent can seek due process with the district leaders, and they would contact the special education lead at that school, and a new meeting would be scheduled to talk about the disagreement and what's best for the student. Danzella, did you want to add?
No,
to that?
perfect.
COVID-19 greatly affected students in special education.
Yes.
How can IEPs address the gaps in learning that may have taken place due to remote learning?
Right. So from my own this is like new for all of us. So from my own personal experience as a case manager, the state had the special education case manager to determine if there were students on their caseload that showed regression due to COVID. And if there was regression, then they were recommended those names were forwarded to our supervisors, and stating that, this child, based off of previous data and how they're doing now, they've really regressed a lot, and they would be a candidate for compensatory services. So that's how it's been dealt with from my experience.
How does the Georgia SB 10 Special Needs Scholarship work for students with special needs and IEPs?
Okay, so parents, I love this scholarship program, and I think I want to talk about the Georgia Scholarship Program from the ideal of what you should know about it. So I pulled out, and this is what I would say to you parents: go to the Georgia Department of Education's website, type in Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Program. The outline is so parent-friendly and easy to read. I'm gonna read the requirements to you right now. And then I'm gonna give you the, ooh, I didn't know that, so that you know how you can help your child to be the best student that they can be. So the requirements is really important that parents understand that in order to qualify for the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Program, a student must meet the following requirements. 1, a student must have a parent or guardian who currently lives in Georgia and has been a resident for 1 year. 2, a student was enrolled and completed the entire school year in a Georgia public school, grades kindergarten through 12th, in order to transfer to a private school. 3, a student was reported attending a Georgia public school by a school district during mandatory student counts And parents, you don't know about this stuff. This is our language, like in the building. You'll hear your case manager say, it's FTE. That is the counts they're speaking of, October, March, and then there's an end of the year count, okay? That is really important. Stick with that last thought, because parents believe that your children have to have an IEP for an entire year before you qualify. No, that's not true. Guess what? You just have to be counted in the count within that year, either October, March, or the end of the year, and your student can qualify for that program for the next year. Okay? So steps if a student is eligible. So the Georgia Department of Education has done a great job with letting us know you have other choices that you didn't know about. Let me tell you what they are. You can transfer to another school within your district. You can transfer to another public school in another district. You can also use this money, so this will be for the deaf and blind students, to transfer to schools for the deaf and blind in the state of Georgia. And you can also put your child in a private school that's authorized. So remember that they must be authorized to support that Georgia Scholarship Program. And last but not least, something that surprised me, that parents may be confused about. When your child is in the private school may qualify for the Georgia Scholarship, that special needs program scholarship, but they may not provide special ed services. The private school is not mandated to provide those services, even if they're getting that money. So you have to make sure you're talking to that school district before you enroll your child, or that private school before you enroll that child. And last but not least, there's no application process. It's just great for parents, okay?
Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up now. How can people contact you to find out more about your services?
Okay, yes, they can contact us at simplyputtingit@gmail.com, or they can call us at 404-358-7902. Our website is still under construction, but by the end of the 31st, you will be able to reach us at simplyputtingit.com. So we look forward to supporting and helping parents feel confident and empowered from grades K until you're complete 12th grade. Okay.
Okay. The mission of the Autism Faith Network is to spread autism awareness, acceptance, and inclusion in local and faith-based communities all over the world. To learn more about our organization, please visit our website at autismfaithnetwork.com or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and/or Twitter. Thank you all for joining us today. Please be blessed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.